Hi, Rich Leiter here. Welcome to Thoughts on Writing. Today I wanted to talk about how writing and painting and creative efforts in general are like bronco busting, like taming a wild horse. When a cowboy tries to bronco bust, he can't sit rigidly in the saddle, because if he does, he'll be thrown immediately. If the wild horse suddenly shifts to the right, well, the cowboy has to shift that way also. If the horse suddenly dips to the left, the cowboy has to do the same thing, all throughout the time that he's riding that wild horse. He's got to constantly be shifting, maneuvering his position to suit the changing position of the bronco so that he can stay on it. If he decides not to at any point and says, no, I'm going to stay in this position no matter what, he will be thrown at that point. Well, it's the same thing with writing and painting. You begin, let's say with writing, you begin writing a piece, a novel, poem, essay, story, whatever, and you write a line. And from the moment you've written that first line, you are now heading in a certain direction. You are on a certain path. Whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not, you've chosen, out of all of the innumerable paths that you could have chosen, the ways you could have chosen to start this story or express it, work on it, you've chosen this one. And it's going to lead you, because you chose that one, in a certain direction, a certain outcome. And then, as you continue writing it, the story shifts depending upon what your next line will be. The story is now going to shift just like the bronco, and you have to be sensitive to it and shift with it, adjust yourself, your style of writing. Adjust, not your style of writing. You have to adjust your subsequent lines to suit that ever-shifting story or piece. In other words, the piece has a life or a will of its own, and you have to be sensitive to that life or that will. You have to respect it and go with it. If you don't, if you remain rigid and fixed, it just won't work out. I mean, now this doesn't mean that you have to totally abandon your vision, the reason why you decided to write the piece or paint the piece. No, you don't do that. But you have to realize that the piece is invariably going to end up differently than the vision you had for it before you began it. That's always been the way it's been with me. It's always somehow different. It may capture the spirit of what you're trying to say, but it will never come out exactly the same as you dreamt it would come out as. You know, this is why when I'm writing something, I'm like seriously into a writing project, I don't read any books, because I know from experience that if I read any books, that the book that I'm reading will invariably creep into the piece that I'm writing. I'm writing and I'm on path A, and then I'm reading this book, and this book is obviously on another path. It's on path D or E. You can't suddenly tack on path D to path A. You can't shift in midstream. And that always happens to me. It always creeps in there, whether I like it or not, and it kind of ruins it for me. So I choose not to read anything when I'm writing. So I'm not going to be influenced in an artificial way by that other piece. Now I'm going to show you a painting that I painted, which I think will better illustrate what I'm trying to say in a more concrete way. It's not necessarily a great painting, but I think that it will help to show you what I mean by this. Bear with me for a second, please. Okay. This is a painting that I did. It's supposed to be a portrait of the painter Balthus, and the source material for this painting was a photograph. It's just a photograph of Balthus standing by a window in France, just looking out of the window, or looking at us, framed in a window. And he's wearing a denim jacket and he has a scarf. So originally, when I did this painting, I painted the face in a very realistic manner, using flesh tones. And of course, I painted the background in a very unrealistic manner, in a very expressionistic manner, using colors that were not in the photograph. And it didn't work. The face didn't work against the background. And being a very slow learner, it took me a while to realize why it didn't work. I was mixing two different ideas in this portrait. I was mixing a realistic face with a very unrealistic background, and the two just didn't mix. I was trying to mix path A with path B. So I thought about it. Let me give you a better view of this thing. Okay. Yes. Okay, so I don't know why, but at some point in my looking at this thing, I thought of Picasso's Blue Period. And I remember that Picasso did two paintings of a friend of his who killed himself, Casagemas. They're both a picture of Casagemas in the coffin, and you can see a bullet hole in one of his temples. One of the pictures is painted with colors, with a lot of colors, colors of a candle, red, yellow, so on, green. But the other picture is more of his Blue Period. It's very subdued. It's mostly just blue background and white. And I thought of it, and I said to myself, well, let's look at my painting. Now, what are colors that I use for the background? Well, I used basically blue. You can see the blue there, and the blue and the white, the light blue, and some yellow ochre on the left side of Balthus's face. So if those are the colors, and also in his denim jacket, of course, and if those are the colors that I used for the background, well then, it stands to reason that those same colors should be in the face in a more subdued way, of course, because that's exactly what Picasso did with Casagemas. The colors in his face are the colors in the background, of course, mixed mostly with white. So that's what I did. If you look closely, you can see that the face is now white with a little bit of shading, which is made up of a little bit of blue and a little bit of yellow ochre. That's basically the face, except for the color right around the eyes. And when I did this, when I stopped making it flesh-colored, realistic, the face, then it worked. Now it all works together. It's all one unified vision. Now, when I showed this painting to my wife, she didn't like it very much because she thought that the face looked very cadaverous, like a corpse drained of blood. And I disagreed with her. I pointed out to her that, well, Picasso did a self-portrait from his Blue Period of just him in an overcoat looking at you, and the face is pretty much just as white as this one is, and yet he doesn't look very, very cadaverous to me. So I don't think it looks that way. I at all. Of course, I'm the artist, so what do I know? So that's what I'm talking about. I was on two different paths in the same picture, and I didn't honor the path of the background. And when I adjusted it, it all came out fine. So Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher, says, all things are a-flowing. And that's right. Everything is always shifting and changing and is dynamic. It's never static. It's always protean. It's always chimerical. And when you're an artist, you have to be very sensitive in the piece you're doing to that ever-shifting, ever-dynamic nature of the piece. You have to go with it every single step of the way, and you have to shift, just like the Bronco buster has to shift his position. And if you constantly shift like that up to the very end, the piece will be successful. And if you don't shift, if you have a rigid idea and you stick with it, even though the piece isn't going there anymore, then you will fail. You have to honor the path that the piece is on. You have to honor the spirit of the piece, and you have to let the piece take you where it wants you to go to a certain extent. I also wrote a poem about this long before I painted this picture. I think the poem actually expresses a lot better than the way I am, and this is just a part of it. From the very first mark you make, from the very first sentence you write, you are already heading in a certain direction. You think that you are heading in another direction, a direction which you would like to be heading in, but you really aren't. The trick is to recognize this and not to struggle with it, to go with it. If you go with it, all will be well. But if you struggle against it, you will be frustrated. Thank you.